Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Gopika Jeevana Smaranam, Govinda Govinda. Sadgurunath Maharaj ki Jai. Kalaye Sundarakaram Sadaika Priyadarshanam Ajnana Nashakam Devam Sadgurum Muralidharam Murali Mandita Karakamalam Munijanamohanam Vyatyasthapadam Vanamala Dharinam Prema Bhakta Mandala Nitya Kirtitam Shri Premika Varadam Ashrayeham. Janmadyasya yathonmayaditaradhaschartheshva vigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Amrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Sadam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Moolanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Kim Va Parairishwaraha Sadyo Hridyavarudyate Atra Kritibihi Shushushubihi Tatkshanad Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukhadamritadrava Samyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha Yam Pravrajantam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayano Virahakatara Ajuhava Putreti Tanmayadaya Taravobhineduhu Tam Sarvabhuta Hridayam Munimanatosmi Yasvanubhavam Akhila Shruti Saramekam Adhyatma Deepam Atititirshatam Tamondham Samsarinam Karunayaha Purana Guhyam Tam Vyasasunu Upayami Gurum Muninam Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Krishnaya Vasudevaya Haraye Paramatmane Pranata Kleshanashaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Pranamo Dukkha Shamanaha Tam Namami Harim Param. Shri Haraye Namaha, Shri Haraye Namaha, Shri Haraye Namaha. Gopika Jeevana Smaranam Govinda Govinda. Sadgurunath Maharaj ki Jai. By the benign grace of Lord Sri Hari, our beloved Madhuri Sakhi Samet Premika Varda Thakurji, and by the immense kripa of our Sadguru Maharaj, His Holiness Maharanyam Sri Muralidhara Swamiji, we have gathered here yet again for another beautiful session of this Bhagavatam 101 class. Until the last session, we enjoyed the first 9 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the last chapter that we saw in the last session, which was the 9th chapter, we enjoyed the stuti that was sung by Bhishmacharya. In the 9th chapter, we found how King Yudhishthira was completely confused after the war. Before the Mahabharata war, his younger brother Arjuna was confused, and after the Mahabharata war, the eldest brother, the eldest son of Kunti, King Yudhishthira, was really confused. He did not want to become the king. He refused to be coronated as the king because he felt that he had killed his own kith and kin to get to the throne. And he was not very happy about it. And Lord Krishna himself tries to convince him that his war was that of dharma. And at times it is indeed important for us to fight for the sake of dharma. And it is not adharmic at all to fight for the sake of dharma, to protect the people from adharma. So, what King Yudhishthira did was right. In spite of Lord Krishna's, counseling him, King Yudhishthira was not convinced, and finally Bhagavan himself took King Yudhishthira and all the Pandavas and Draupadi and Kunti to the battlefield where Bhishmacharya was lying down on the bed of arrows. And it was there and then that Bhishmacharya talks about all the dharmas, Moksha Dharma, Raja Dharma, Sri Dharma, Bhagavad Dharma. He talks about all the dharma, and finally he actually gives the essence of all the dharmas in the form of Vishnu Sahasranama Stotra, which is the essence of Bhagavata Dharma, which is Nama Sankirtana, chanting the divine names of the Lord. So he introduced the 1,000 divine names of the Lord to this world in that battlefield, on his deathbed, to King Yudhishthira in the presence of Bhagavan. And after that, Bhishmacharya extols Bhagavan because he now is ready to quit his mortal coil and he is now ready to merge with the Lord. Being a yogi, all he did was he looked at Bhagavan, he sang a beautiful praise of 11 verses. As we said earlier, the 11 verses are for showing that he was a yogi. He had controlled his 10 senses and his mind. The 5 karmendriyas, 5 jnanendriyas and his mind. He had controlled all the 11 of them, and now he was offering all of them to the Lord in the form of Bhishma Stuti. And at the end of the Stuti, Bhishmacharya merges with Lord Sri Krishna, and after performing all the funeral rites of Bhishmacharya, King Yudhishthira is crowned, and he's coronated, and he takes up the responsibility of taking care of the subjects of Hastinapura. And with that, we concluded the 9th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapurana. And the 10th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapurana begins with Lord Sri Krishna readying himself to leave Hastinapura to Dwaraka. If we remember, back in 8th chapter, Krishna was already set to go to Dwaraka. And while he was on the chariot and just about to leave, it was then that Uttara came running and she sought, refuge in the lotus feet of Bhagwan so that he could save her from the Brahmastra. Not even her. She wanted the child in her womb to be saved. And it was then that Kunti did the stuti, and finally Kunti Devi convinced Bhagwan that you cannot leave now. Just after the war, you can't leave without getting enough rest. So you have to be here for some time. And the other reason why Bhagavan opted to stay back in Hastinapura was because of King Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira was not convinced, so Bhagavan had to make sure that he was convinced and he took up this kingdom. So Bhagavan waited till then. And now that Yudhishthira was coronated as the king, Bhagavan thought that all his job, out there in Hastinapura was done. And he took leave from each and every one of them. Bhagavatam describes that beautifully. He goes to Kunti Devi, he embraces, he actually prostrates unto Yudhishthira, he embraces Arjuna, and he looks at Subhadra, he bids farewell to Draupadi. He says goodbye to everyone, to each and everyone there, and he's just about to leave Hastinapura. At that time, all the subjects of Hastinapura, and more particularly the Pandavas and Draupadi and Kunti and Subhadra, all of them were so sad. Bhagavatam says that Draupadi, Kunti and Subhadra tried their best not to cry. Their eyes were full of tears, but they saw to it that not one drop fell to the ground, it seems. Because it is a belief that when your beloved one leaves to a country, you're not supposed to cry. If we cry, it's an ill omen. So they didn't want anything to go wrong with Bhagavan's trip or Bhagavan's voyage out there, his journey. So they were very particular not to cry, but at the same time, they were so pained by the impending separation. Imagine, Bhagavan had been with them all this time. And now he was leaving. After, giving all that one could really desire for to King Yudhishthira, he did all that he could do for the Pandavas, and now, as if nothing of that actually belonged to him, he was just moving off. Absolutely detached. He didn't claim anything. That's the beauty of Bhagavan, isn't it? And Bhagavatam says, who will not cry? Who will not feel sad, about Bhagavan's separation? Satsangat mukta dussango hatum notsahate buddhaha kirtyamanam yasho yasya sakrida karnyarochanam tasmin न्यस्तदीय पार्थाः सहेरन् विरहं कथं दर्शन स्पर्श संलाप शयनासन भोजनैः सत्संगात् मुक्त दुस्संगो हातुं न उत्सते बुधः. Buddha, a wise man who is mukta dussango, who has given up evil company. How? Through satsanga. Satsangat mukta dussango. Those wise men who have given up every kind of worldly attachment, who have given up every kind of evil company because of being in satsanga, being in the fellowship of a sadhu. Even these people who have been with the sadhus, who have had satsanga, they are unable to forgo the joy of listening to the glories of Bhagavan. Now they are not with Bhagavan in the sense that Bhagavan is not physically with them. Right? Because many of them who are in satsang may not be a contemporary of Bhagavan. Is it not? And though not a contemporary, though we have not lived during the times of Lord Krishna or during the time of Lord Rama, today when we sit and listen to the stories of Bhagavan, today when we sit and listen to the Leelas of Bhagavan, we find it so difficult to forego this pleasure of listening to the Katha. Is it not? That being the case, here Bhagavatam, our Shukacharya, he asks, when that is the case, how can these devotees, tasmin yastadiya partha saheran viraham katham, how can they bear the separation? Why? Darshana sparsha samlapa shayanasana bhojanaihi. It's not that they had just heard about Bhagavan. They were seeing Bhagavan. They could touch Bhagavan. Bhagavan would hug them. And Bhagavan would talk to them. Shayana asana bhojanaihi. They would sleep, they would eat, they would walk, they would talk, everything with Bhagavan. When they have been like that with Bhagavan, how difficult it must be for them to really, let Bhagavan live like that. So, there's no wonder they were all extremely pained, and having stayed there, in Hastinapura for quite some time, not just the Pandavas and Kunti and Subhadra, but all the subjects of Hastinapura, all the people of Hastinapura, they had become really attached to Bhagavan. More so, the ladies of Hastinapura. Obviously, because Bhagavan is Manmatha, is it not? So when Bhagavan was leaving to Dwaraka, his chariot was ready, and all the Pandavas, they were actually accompanying him to just, give him a send-off. And when they were all walking through the streets, when Bhagavan was on the chariot on the street, that time, all the ladies of Hastinapura, they're standing out there on the balconies of their houses, it seems. And from there, they're talking with each other about the glory of Bhagavan. Here we find a very beautiful stuti by the ladies of Hastinapura. That they say, they begin, very beautifully. They look at each other and they say, do you know who that is? Do you know who was with us all these days, all these months? Do you know what privilege we have had? With whom we have been talking? Whom we have been seeing in action? Do you know? Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano Yaeka Asit Avishesha Atmani Agre Gunebhyo Jagatatmanishware Nimilitatman Nishi Supta Shaktishu Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano. They start by saying, he is that Purana Purusha. He is that eternal being. He is that supreme Brahman. He is our very own self. We had the privilege of talking, walking, seeing and, playing with that supreme Brahman, who is our own self. This Lord Krishna is no different from the supreme Brahman. That is how they start the stuti. And then they say, who he is? He is the one who revealed the Vedas so that this entire universe could be created. He is the one who is being meditated upon by the yogis in order to attain him. He is the one who has been sung in all our scriptures, Adi, Madhya, Anta. In the beginning, in the middle, in the end, you look into any scripture, Harihi Sarvatra Giyate. It is the Lord who has been sung everywhere. Absolutely. And this is that Lord who has been sung in all the scriptures. And he is the one who descends again and again, who does avatar again and again in order to protect dharma. That is this Lord. And believe it or not, that Lord is now born in the race of Yadus. Ha! The ladies, they exclaim. They say, wow, what kind of fortune, did this Yadukula, the race of Yadus, do? How are they being blessed with such a rare thing? Aholam shlagyatamam yadokulam aholam punyatamam madhorvanam yadesha pumsam rishabah shriyah patihi swajanmana chankramanena chanchati. How supremely praiseworthy is this race of Yadus, where the Lord himself, has been born. And this Madhuvana, the forest of the Madhu, where Bhagavan is roaming about gaily. Is it not? And they celebrate. They start by telling that this is the Bhagavan who is the supreme Brahman. This is the Bhagavan sung in Vedas. This is the Bhagavan who revealed the Vedas for creating this universe. This is the Bhagavan who actually yogis meditate upon. And that Bhagavan has now descended in Yadukula and has become our Krishna and is protecting our land. And he's protecting us. And finally, they praise, the wives of Bhagavan, all the Ashtamahishi, and also the 16,100 ladies who are fortunate enough to marry Bhagavan. They say, oh my God, how lucky they are, how fortunate they are that they have Bhagavan himself for their concert, as their divine concert. That was the beautiful stuti that has been sung by the Hastinapura ladies. And with that, the 10th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam comes to an end. It's concluded. And in the 11th chapter, Bhagavan has left Hastinapura and is entering Dwaraka. Now Bhagavan enters Dwaraka. And as soon as Bhagavan reaches the entrance of Dwaraka, he picks up his beautiful conch, his Shanka, and he blows it, it seems. And Shukacharya describes this Shankanadha, the way Bhagavan is blowing the conch very beautifully. He says, Sa uchchakashe dhavalo daro daropi urukramasya adhara shona shonima Dadmayamanaha karakanja sampute yatabja khande kalahamsa utsvanaha. When Bhagavan took that white Panchajanya, the Bhagavan's conch is called Panchajanya, when Bhagavan took that beautiful white lustrous Panchajanya in his hand, Bhagavan's hands are like lotus. It's so rose, and Bhagavan's, we call it Nama Pankajanabhaya, Nama Pankajamalaye, Nama Pankajanetraye, Namaste Pankajangaraye. Everything about the Lord is lotus, is it not? Is lotus-like. So here Bhagavan is holding on to that white conch in his hand, and when Bhagavan is taking it near his lips, Shukacharya says, Bhagavan's lips are red like coral, it seems. And when this bulb of the conch comes near the beautiful lips of Bhagavan, the light, the reddish hue of the lip is reflected on the bulb of the conch, it seems. And it looks as if a beautiful hamsa bird, a beautiful white swan is sitting out there, with the rosy lips. The bulb of the conch looks like the beak of, the hamsa pakshi, the beak of the swan. And Bhagavan's hand being lotus, when Bhagavan took it near his mouth, it looked as if the swan was sitting on a beautiful lotus. And the moment the subjects of Dwaraka, they heard the sound of the conch, the Shankar Dhwani, they immediately knew that their Lord had arrived. And they all came out there and to welcome Bhagavan. And finally, they also do a beautiful stuti here. The subjects of Dwaraka also sing the glories of Bhagavan. And here they say, you are everything for us. You are our father, you are our mother, you are our guru, you are everything for us, Krishna. Bhavayanastvam bhava vishwabhavana tvameva matata suhritpati pita tvam sadguruhu na paramam cha daivatam yasyanu vritya kritino bhavovima. And they all welcome Bhagavan in. And when Bhagavan, he is getting into his palace, all the subjects are still following him. And they can't take their eyes out of him. Shukacharya says, Nityam nirikshamananam yadati dwarakaukasam. This is not the first time they are seeing Bhagavan. As a matter of fact, when Bhagavan is in Dwaraka, all the subjects get to see Krishna every day, it seems. He is such a king who walks out into the city every day, and everyone would see him every day. Nityam nirikshamananam yadapi dwarakaukasam. Though the subjects, the people of Dwaraka, got to see Bhagavan every day, na vitrupyantihi drishaha shriyodamangam achyudam. Their eyes were never satiated, it seems. They never had enough of Bhagavan's darshan, and they were craving for more and more of Bhagavan's darshan. So, after the Mahabharata war, Bhagavan leaves Hastinapura and is back to Dwaraka, and all the consorts of Bhagavan, Rukmini Devi and the rest of them, they are very, very happy, they are very thrilled to see Bhagavan back. And with that note, the 11th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam comes to a conclusion. And in the 12th chapter, Shaunaka Maharishi, if we remember, the entire conversation of Bhagavatam is between Shaunaka Rishi and the other rishis who have gathered there in Naimisharanya and Suta Pauranika. Is it not? So here, Shaunaka Maharishi is asking, Suta Pauranika, now that Bhagavan is back to Dwaraka, he has a valid question. He says, remember the 8th chapter? He told that Uttara came running, she surrendered unto Bhagavan, and Bhagavan saved the child in the womb of Uttara Devi. Bhagavan entered the womb of Uttara Devi and he protected the child using his own effulgence, using his own tejas. He went around the little child and he saw to it that the Brahmastra had no effect on it. And that little baby in the womb was looking at Bhagavan all the time. Is it not? Now Shaunaka Rishi is asking, what happened to the child? please tell us the story of that child. And immediately Suta Pauranika tells us the most important aspect of Srimad Bhagavatam, the birth of Parikshith. Why is it so important? But for Parikshith, we would not be having Bhagavatam today. Is it not? Today we are sitting and listening to Bhagavatam. We are enjoying reading Bhagavatam. We love Bhagavatam. But how did we get this? It is only because of Parikshith. That is the reason why Suta Pauranika, when he started Bhagavatam, he says that, we need to start with the story of Parikshith. And that's how he starts with Mahabharata war, so that we understand why Ashwatthama is attacking the child in the womb of Uttara and how that child is born. So that's why we begin with Mahabharata, and here Suta Pauranika, he says beautifully, when Uttara came running, he is kind of giving us the synopsis of that chapter again. And when she fell at the feet of Bhagavan, Bhagavan immediately entered her womb and he was protecting her, is it not? At that time, inside the womb, this little baby was looking at Bhagavan. And how was Bhagavan? Angushta matram amalam, spurat purata maulinam, apiche darshanam shyamam, tadidvasa samachyutam. Angushta matram amalam. Bhagavan was this thumb size, it seems. But even in that thumb size Bhagavan, the features were so distinct that the child could enjoy the beauty of Bhagavan in spite of being that small form. And he was wearing this Pitambara, which was like lightning, everything in that little form. Imagine a miniature Krishna, if we swallow it off. How would it be? That's exactly how the child was looking at this little Krishna, who was only thumb size, and he was enjoying it. And that child was born when all the stars were in the most favorable position. Tata sarva gunodarke sanukula grahodaye jagge vamshadara pandoho bhuya pandurivaujasa. When all the stars were in the most favorable position, this child was born. And since this child was protected by the Lord himself when he was in the womb of his mother, the child was named as Vishnu Rata, the one who is protected by Bhagavan, Vishnu. So he was called Vishnu Rata. As soon as this child was born, good news, it started crying. Because if a child doesn't cry, we make it cry, is it not? But the bad news was, the child started crying and it would not stop. They tried all that they could. They showed all the playthings. The mother took little child in her hand. She was cajoling it. They tried all that they could. But this child would not stop crying. And it was looking around and round and round, and it was not happy to see even its mother. It felt completely at loss, and it kept crying. And the beauty is, the Pandavas were so used to Krishna for everything that the moment the child started crying, they sent a word to Dwaraka, it seems. They said, Krishna, the child of Uttara and Abhimanyu is crying, please come. Why? To console it. And Bhagavan came running. Bhakta Vatsala, is it not? See, when Bhagavan takes the responsibility of a family, we can't explain or express to what extent Bhagavan would go, to what extent Bhagavan would do things to protect that family. The Pandava Charitra, the entire Mahabharata, entire episode where Krishna does everything for the Pandavas is actually a proof of that. If only we surrender ourselves like that to the lotus feet of Bhagavan, he would take care of every little thing. Even if a child cries in our house, he would come running to console it. That's the love that Bhagavan has for his own devotees. But Bhagavan should feel that we are his own. And for that, we should offer ourselves like that to Bhagavan. Is it not? So Bhagavan came running from Dwaraka to Hastinapura back again, and when he saw the little child, he took the child in his hands, and the moment this baby looked at the lotus countenance of Bhagavan, it started smiling. It had been searching for this face all this time. Is it not? Because that child had seen Bhagavan when he was still in the womb of his mother. And the moment he came out, he was looking for that beautiful uncle whom he had seen inside. And he kept looking at every face to find that face. And that was one reason why he was also called Parikshith. Since he kept testing, he did pariksha of every face to see if that is the face that he saw when he was in the mother's womb. And so he was called Parikshith. That is how he got his name Parikshith. And the moment the child was born, after a few days, King Yudhishthira wanted to do the Jata Karma. After naming, it's a tradition to actually look into the horoscope. And he called all the Pandits there, all the great scholars, all Mahatmas, and he asked them to look into the horoscope of this child and to tell his future, to read out his future. And the Mahatmas, they drew the horoscope immediately, and they say that Ikshvakuriva Manavaha, he will protect. This child will be a great person. He is going to protect his subjects like Ikshvaku himself. See, Ikshvaku was the king of the Surya Kula. Like the Kula, the race of Lord Sri Rama. And this child will protect his subjects like King Ikshvaku. And he will be true to his word. He will be a Satyasandha like Sri Rama himself, Lord Sri Rama himself. And he'll have unflinching devotion to the Lord like Prahlada. And they give a lot of lists and they say, in all the virtues, he will be like Krishna himself. That's how great this Parikshith was. And they don't stop there. They also say that he'll be ruling for a long time, very well, and he'll keep his subjects really happy. And finally, one day, he would insult a great sadhu, and because of that, he would be punished. He would be cursed by the son of the sadhu, and he would die in 7 days from that curse. And the curse would be that he would die in 7 days due to the bite of a Deva Naga, a divine serpent called Takshaka. And when he is cursed like that, this child Parikshith would seek refuge in sadhus, and Shukacharya himself would come and narrate Srimad Bhagavatam to this child. And having heard Srimad Bhagavatam, he would attain the lotus feet of Lord. Believe it or not, these Mahatmas, they actually say everything about Parikshith's life on the first day. When they have this horoscope in their hand, they tell everything. That's how deep that science is, only if we know how to read it properly. If we have someone who is really efficient in reading horoscopes, it's indeed possible to actually read through the future. That's the beauty of it. That's what we see in Bhagavatam here. And so Parikshith is born. And that is the 12th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Once Yudhishthira hears that all is going to be fine with Parikshith, he is not really concerned about the curse, because anyone is going to die. Everyone is going to die. No one is going to live forever. That being the case, King Yudhishthira was very happy that Parikshith would actually listen to Bhagavatam and attain the lotus feet of Bhagavan. That's what matters, is it not? What happens at the end of our life is what matters, which we are going to see even in the second canto, where Shukacharya himself is going to say, Ante Narayana Smritihi. Do whatever you do in your life. But at the time of death, if you can bring your mind to think of Bhagavan, if you can establish your mind, the lotus feet of Bhagavan, then that's it. Whatever you did was right. We don't have to go and check with any scripture. If at the last moment, during your last breath, if you are able to think of Bhagavan, if you can establish your mind in Krishna, then whatever we did so far was right. And that was going to happen to Parikshith. So Yudhishthira was quite happy with the horoscope, whatever they read in the horoscope. And finally, since Bhagavan is there now again in Hastinapura, he helps King Yudhishthira perform a few Ashwamedha Yagas. Yudhishthira does 3 Ashwamedha Yagas with Bhagavan's support and help and grace and blessings. And finally, Bhagavan leaves to Dwaraka again from Hastinapura, and this time Arjuna accompanies Bhagavan all through. He goes to Dwaraka with Bhagavan, and with that, the 12th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam comes to a conclusion. And in 13th chapter, there's a slight digression here, because after the Mahabharata war, all the Kauravas are dead except one child called Yuyutsu. Everyone else, all the 100 brothers of Duryodhana are dead. And Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, the parents of the Kauravas, the parents of Duryodhana and his brothers, they were actually staying with King Yudhishthira after the war. And the great wise minister, Vidura, who was also really a great bhakta of Bhagavan, was not there with them during the war. Because just before the war, when Pandavas were, asking for some kind of a compromise, and when even Bhagavan Krishna himself came as a messenger, and he sought some kind of a compromise, he asked them to offer, just 5 cities or 5 villages, if not possible, at least 5 houses, or, anything bare minimum to Pandavas. Bhagavan said, they can manage, just give them something, and they'll build their land from there. And that is what exactly Duryodhana was frightened about. He knew that if he gave them even a bit of space, they would flourish. So he didn't want to do that. He said, I would not give them even, so much space which can be occupied by the tip of a needle. That's what he said. At that time, Vidura, who has always been wise and was always righteous, being the avatara, being the incarnation of Yamadharma himself, he knew all the dharmas. So he tries to talk some sense into Duryodhana and particularly Dhritarashtra. Because Dhritarashtra was not merely blind, He was not just physically blind. It's not that he just did not have the eyesight, but he really did not have the foresight, to see what would happen to his own children if he just let him. If he just let them do whatever they wanted, through their whim and fancy. So he didn't know that because his vision, his internal vision, his intellectual vision was actually blinded by attachment that he had for his own children. So Vidura was trying to talk some sense into it, and he said, don't do that. Yudhishthira, I'm not afraid. He says, I'm not really afraid of Arjuna's valor or Bhima's strength. Vidura says, he says, but Dhritarashtra, you ought to be frightened for the dharma, the righteousness of King Yudhishthira. That would kill you. Nothing else. He tries to talk some sense. At that time, Duryodhana insults Vidura, and immediately Vidura leaves the court. He leaves his bow and arrow at the gate of the palace, and he just leaves to Kshetra Yatra, Tirtha Yatra. He starts visiting holy places. He's out there on pilgrimage, and he's not there at all during Mahabharata war. And after a few days, when he hears about the outcome of Mahabharata war, that King Yudhishthira and the Pandavas have won the war, that all the Kauravas are dead, he comes back to Hastinapura to meet his kin. And Yudhishthira Maharaj is extremely pleased to welcome Vidura back, and he prostrates unto Vidura, his own uncle, and with tears in his eyes, he asks Vidura Maharaj, you forgot all of us? We are your children. How could you stay away from us for such a long time? And he asks about all the welfare. At that time, Vidura is happy to be back, and he is also talking about all his pilgrimage and his trip to Yudhishthira, and finally he decides to stay in Hastinapura for some time. Now the real purpose of Vidura's coming to Hastinapura and staying back was to again talk to Dhritarashtra. So one fine morning, he goes to the palace of Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, and he addresses his own brother, his elder brother. He says, "Brother, how are you?" And Dhritarashtra is so pleased to have Vidura back. And, he says, "Vidura, what can I say? I'm so happy. I've never been so comfortable. I've never been so happy. And Bhima takes care of me so well. Every morning, Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, they come and they prostrate unto me. And it is Bhima who actually gives me food, at the right times. There's nothing to complain." Absolutely. When Dhritarashtra says this, Vidura is shocked. He says, "How can you be like this? You lost all your children. In spite of that, have you not got any vairagya? Did you not develop any dispassion for this world? How can you sit here in the house of Yudhishthira, of the Pandavas, whom you had planned again and again to kill? You did not let them live in peace even for a moment. You tried your best to, get rid of them. And today, you're sitting inside their house. And remember, after the war, you really wanted to kill Bhima because he had killed your son Duryodhana. And today, you're talking, here Vidura is so harsh. Because sometimes when we want people to have that vairagya, talking a bit in a namby-pamby way will not really work. Is it not? You have to be crystal clear. Here Vidura says, "Bhima pavajjitam pindam adatte grihapalavad." Bhima is throwing biscuits at you, like to a dog, and you're eating it. You're happy about it. When are we going to change? And Dhritarashtra for once listens to Vidura. And Vidura says, "Don't wait. Leave the court right now. It's high time you take care of yourself and you attain Bhagwan." And Vidura, Gandhari and Dhritarashtra, when Dhritarashtra leaves with Vidura, Gandhari, who is such a great pativrata, she follows her husband and they all go to the southern part of Himalayas, and there Dhritarashtra has he sets up a little ashrama, and Vidura also stays with them to help them out. And here, next day morning, when Yudhishthira comes to prostrate unto his elders, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, he finds them missing. He immediately asks Sanjaya, where they are, and Sanjaya is crying. He himself has no clue about what happened to Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. At that time, Yudhishthira is very pained, and he feels responsible for whatever happened. He feels maybe they were hurt, or maybe I didn't treat them well. Maybe that's why they left me. And while that kind of guilt was seeping in, at that moment, sage Narada came there. And Yudhishthira immediately puts forth the question. He says, "I don't know what I did. Maybe I insulted them. Maybe I didn't take good care of them. How unfortunate that they have left us." And he's crying. Sage Narada says, "Don't cry for anybody else." It's funny. When we cry for others, often we forget that anytime we could be afflicted with the same things. Is it not? So Naraji kind of warns him. He says, things may not remain the same for long. Because Bhagavan's avatara karya, the purpose of Bhagavan's descent is almost done. His work is done. So once that is over, Bhagavan may not stay in this earth for long. He may decide to go back to his divine abode. So Naraji warns him and he says, and don't worry about Dhritarashtra and Gandhari and Vidura, because Dhritarashtra and Gandhari have actually gone to the Himalayas due to the advice of Vidura, and there 5 days from now, Dhritarashtra will attain the lotus feet of Bhagavan and Gandhari will follow suit. And having seen them attain Bhagavan, Vidura would continue with his pilgrimage. So don't worry about others. So Naraji warns about the impending Leela Samvarana of Bhagavan. Leela Samvarana means the conclusion of Leela of Bhagavan. And Yudhishthira is a bit perturbed. And in the 14th chapter, Yudhishthira perceives that Arjuna has not returned. Remember, after Bhagavan did the 3 Ashwamedha Yagas for Yudhishthira, Bhagavan left back to Dwaraka and Arjuna followed him, is it not? And after that, Arjuna had not come back. And there was no news from Dwaraka. And having heard sage Narada speak about this impending danger of Bhagavan's Leela Samvarana, Yudhishthira was not very comfortable. He was very disturbed. And to add on to it, he started seeing ill omen. And in the entire 14th chapter, there's a description of how the kind of, ill omens that he was seeing. He says that, from the udder of the cows, blood was oozing. And the cows refused to give milk. And the images, the deities in the temple were actually crying. And they were moving here and there. And he could see meteorites falling. And all the sattvic animals, which are supposed to go towards our right, was going towards the left. And he could hear all the wailings of the fox and all that, which was all showing some kind of impending bad news. And when Yudhishthira was really worried, he was telling Bhima that, I feel something is wrong. And at that moment, Arjuna comes. And from a distance, Yudhishthira is actually not able to believe that he is seeing Arjuna. Because the splendor, the lustre of Arjuna's face, the tejas was lost. He didn't look like Arjuna at all. He was crying and he looked so weak, very unlike Arjuna. And Yudhishthira was very worried. He looked at Arjuna and he asked, Arjuna, what is wrong? Is everything alright? Is everyone okay in Dwaraka? What's wrong with you? Did you do something which is adharmic? Something unrighteous? Did you not actually offer refuge to someone who surrendered unto you? Or did you not, show hospitality properly to someone who deserved it? Or did you have some kind of a bad association? Or were you defeated by someone who's lower than you in skill? Or someone who's your equal? What's wrong, Arjuna? Tell me. Is everything okay? Is Krishna okay? Is Balarama okay? Are everybody in Dwaraka okay? Please tell me. And when Yudhishthira questions like that, in the 16th chapter, Arjuna replies. He starts by telling, Banchitoham Maharaja Harina Bandhurupina Yena me apahritam tejo Deva Vismapanam Mahat. He says, brother, we have been cheated. You know why? Because that person whom we thought was just our friend, who was a relative. Krishna, he is not merely that. He is actually Hari. Harina Bandhu Rupina. We have been cheated by the Lord himself because he was behaving with us as if he was just a relative. We have been cheated. All that I had, all the glories, that we have to our credit are actually not to our credit at all. They all belong to Bhagavan. And today I realize it. And only today I understand that I could win over Draupadi during the Draupadi Swayamvara. Not because of my skill, but because Krishna was there in that court. Remember, till then, we were the unhappy lot. Right from the day we were born, we were the unhappy lot. We had the skill, we had the strength, we were good at everything, but still, we were never happy. We were always driven out. Is it not? But that day, when Draupadi Swayamvara happened, and Krishna was there, from that day our life changed. And I won Draupadi, not because of my skill, because of Krishna's grace. I understand that now. I won over Indra. I did Kandava Dahana. I burned the entire forest of Kandava and I offered it to Lord Agni. Not by my prowess, but by Krishna's grace. I realize it now. Bhima killed Jarasandha. It was actually a duel. And we thought that Bhima did it. No, Krishna was there. We should remember Krishna was there this entire Mahabharata war. We were saved every moment. We were able to win everybody. And finally, the entire war, we were victorious because Krishna was with us. How do I know it? I know it today, my dear brother, because the Gandiva, my bow, is the same. My quiver full of arrows, they are the same. I am the same Arjuna, but nothing is working the same. I don't know why. I could not fight the forest dwellers today. I lost to them. I lost my splendor. Why? Because Krishna has left this Bhuloka. He has completed his Leela and now he's up there, he has gone back to his divine abode. And when Arjuna said so much, while he was telling this to Yudhishthira, he had actually spoken about the glory of Bhagavan all along, is it not? And in Bhagavatam says, it was at this moment that all that Krishna taught him in Bhagavad Gita actually made sense to him, it seems. Till then he had not really understood. He could not remember the teachings of Gita. But today, after he told Bhagavatam, what is Bhagavatam? The glory of Bhagavan, is it not? So after he told Bhagavatam, it was only then that his mind was clear of all the doubts and he could really understand the inner essence of Bhagavad Gita. The moment Yudhishthira heard this, he gave up his kingdom. He gave the kingdom to, little Parikshith, and he walked out of the palace as if he were dumb and deaf, completely oblivious to the world. He just walked out, he didn't talk to anybody, and the Pandavas and Draupadi, they just followed Yudhishthira, and Kunti Devi, the moment she heard that Bhagavan had left this world, the next second she sat down and she thought of Bhagavan's lotus feet and she attained him. She didn't live for a minute after she knew that Bhagavan had left his mortal coil. That was the kind of love she had for Bhagavan, that separation was unbearable for her, and she attained Bhagavan immediately. And all these Pandavas and Draupadi, they walked towards Himalayas and finally they attained Swarga. And the 15th chapter describes this Swarga Arohana of the Pandavas, and Bhagavatam says that it is such a Punya Charitra, just listening to the ascending of the Pandavas to heaven would actually give us Krishna Bhakti. That's how great these Pandavas were, for whom Bhagavan did so much. Bhagavan's center in his avatar as Krishna was Pandavas, the Pandava family, is it not? That is how great these devotees were, and the mere thought of such devotees would actually bless us with such devotion to the lotus feet of Lord too. So now that the Pandavas had also ascended the heaven, Parikshit grew up and he took hold of the kingdom. Now the kingdom was under his control, and Bhagavatam says that as Parikshit was ruling, this almost the entire world, because Hastinapura was really powerful and Parikshit was ruling it just as the Mahatmas described after seeing the horoscope, Ikshvaku iva manavaha. Such a dharmic rule was happening during the reign of Parikshit that all the subjects were so happy. And Parikshit at that time heard that Kali Yuga had set in. Now the moment actually when Bhagavan Krishna was there, Kali Yuga had already entered. But since Bhagavan was there, Kali Yuga could not, the Kali Purusha, could not actually show his power. But the moment Bhagavan left this earth, Kali started spreading. Kali Purusha started attacking people. And Parikshit had heard about it, and he set out on a Digvijaya to win over this Kali Purusha. That was his intention. And when Parikshit was going around, roaming around, city after city, state after state, winning everyone over, everywhere, he heard the glories of Bhagavan. If people see him pass, they'll say, who this is? He's King Parikshit. You know which family he belongs to? He belongs to the Pandava family. And believe it or not, it was this king, Parikshith, who Bhagavan himself protected when he was in the mother's womb. You know, people were talking about him like that. And he was so thrilled because it was not about him. Whenever they spoke about him, it was always about Bhagavan. So he got to hear time and again how Bhagavan saved his family, how Bhagavan loved his family, what Bhagavan did for his family, and how personally Bhagavan saved him. And he used to feel very proud. He used to feel that, Bhagavan had been so close to his family, and that his family and he meant so much to Bhagavan. So, when he was going through this Digvijaya and listening to all the glories, not far away, in a place, he saw something really unique. There was this Rishabha, a bull, which was standing only on one leg, and there was this cow, which was crying, and there was this man who was dressed up like a king, but he could not be a king by the look of him, and he was wielding a sword, and he was actually threatening to kill that bull. And this cow was crying. He was hurting the cow and the bull. At that time, there's a little conversation that happens between this bull and the cow. And the bull is looking at the cow and he's asking, "Mother, why are you crying? Why are you so sad? What happened? Is it because, Kali Yuga has set in? Or is it because people are not following Dharma anymore? Or is it because Bhagavan Sri Krishna is not adorning you anymore? His lotus feet is not adorning this, bhumi anymore. What is the cause of your tears?" And immediately, this little cow, she says, "I am sad about everything. I am sad that Kali has set in. I am sad that people are not in Dharma. But the root cause of all this sorrow and of all these things, of Kali being set and of people being unrighteous, everything is because Bhagavan is not, living with us here anymore. He has left to his divine abode, is it not? And that is the main cause of my sorrow." And when Parikshith looks at, this unique scene there, and he's really very anxious to know what's happening. So he goes near them and he looks at that king-like person who's not actually king, who's dressed up like a king, and he says, "Who are you? How dare you hurt a bull and a cow in my kingdom? How unrighteous thing to do, what an unrighteous thing to do in my kingdom. I would not stop without punishing you." And he looks at that bull and he asks, "Who are you? How come you're standing in just one leg? And who has brought you to this state? You're supposed to have 4 legs, is it not? You've lost 3 of them. So, who did this harm to you? Please tell me." Immediately the bull said, "What can I say, O king? What can I say? Who caused this to me? If you ask people what is the cause of their sorrow, each of them will tell something different. Is it not? So someone will say that it is because of the fate. Someone will say, "Arey, my horoscope is like that." Somebody will say, "Oh, my neighbor is the cause." Some people will say, "My relatives are the cause." Is it not? So each of them give a different reason. That being so, how can I say, what is the reason? There could be hundreds of reasons for my sorrow. When Parikshith saw that this bull was not actually pointing out to the person who was actually causing harm, because that person was right beside him. This person who was dressed up as a king was the one who was hurting this bull, is it not? All the bull had to do was just point a finger and say, "This is the person who is hurting me." That's it, is it not? But the bull did not do that. Why? Immediately Parikshith says, "You must be Dharma himself." Vrisharupadrik. This Rishabha, this bull was Dharma himself. And how did he get it? Parikshith says Dharmam braveshi dharmagya dharmosi vrisharubhadruk yada dharma kritasthanam suchakasyapi tadbhavet. There's a very technical point, in dharma. The nuances of dharma are not easy to understand. Dharma says that if someone does something wrong, and if someone else complains about this person, if they point a finger and they say, this is the one who did it, then suchakasyapi yadbhavet. Tadbhavet. The person who points out to the fault of others will accrue the sin of the person to whom he is pointing. So this is the nuance of dharma, is it not? So only dharma could know it. So Parikshit says, since the person who is harming you is actually right in front of you, and in spite of that you decide not to point to him, obviously you are someone who knows dharma really. You know the nuances of dharma and you have to be dharma himself. In that case, this should be Mother Earth. Dharma has 4 legs. Satyam, Tapaha, Shaucham and Daya. And in Kali Yuga, Dharma stands only on the leg of Satya. The other 3 are gone with the other 3 yugas. Tapaha, Shaucham and Daya. All the 3 are gone. So that's how this is Dharma and this must be Mother Earth. In that case, this person should be Kali Purusha. He understands that and immediately he takes a sword and is all set to kill Kali Purusha. Next moment, Kali Purusha falls at the feet of Parikshit and he surrenders. And Parikshit just smiles and he says, in our entire family, none of us would take action against someone who was surrendered. So that is our principle. So, just go away. Run away. But see to it that I don't find you anywhere any part of my kingdom. He says, but see to it that I don't see you anywhere in my kingdom. Immediately Kali Purusha is all tears. He says, how can I do that? You rule this entire world right now. But this is my time. This is Kali Yuga. I'm supposed to be there somewhere. If you don't give me any place in your kingdom, it means I can't live anywhere at all because the entire world is your kingdom right now. You're ruling everywhere. So please give me some place to stay. And Parikshit immediately, he thinks a bit and he says, okay, I'll give you 4 places. Dyutam, Panam, Striyaha, Suna, Yatra Adharmaha Chaturvidaha. There are 4 places where adharma is really prevalent. One is Dyutam. Dyutam is, gambling. And the other is Panam, is intoxication. Striyaha, illicit relationships. And Suna is Himsa, is violence. Is it not? So he says, these 4 places, adharma is really prevalent. Why? In gambling, we have lies. People lie. In intoxication, there is pride. And in illicit relationship, there is lust. And in violence, there is himsa. Is it not? So, these 4 places are the abode of Kali Purusha. We go anywhere near these, then we are most welcome into the world of Kali Purusha. That's how it is. But in spite of giving these 4 places, Kali Purusha would not let go of Parikshit's feet. He was still holding on. He said, you have not given me the basic thing. These 4 are useless without that. And finally, after much begging, Parikshit says, okay, Punascha yachamanaya jata rupa madat prabhu tato anritam madam kamam rajo vairam cha panchamam. So finally, Parikshit says, okay, I grant you gold as the 5th place. And when we say gold, you should remember that what he means here is money being stagnated in a place, without putting it to the right use. If we keep accumulating money and storing it, Kali Purusha is sitting out there. What is there in money? What vice is there in money? Vairam cha panchamam. Enmity. Money breeds enmity, is it not? So that would lead to fight and to their destruction. So, he gives these 5 places and he leaves. So, why would Parikshit not kill Kalipurusha? He had the chance, is it not? All of us would be saved. So, why did he not do that? Saranga iva sarabhuk. Bhagavatam says that he was like a bee which knew to take the good things alone from anybody. You know, this bee, he does not go and sit on any filth. It sits on a flower, and that too in such a way that he does not hurt the flower and just sucks the honey out of it painlessly. Saranga iva sarabhuk. It takes the essence of all the flowers, which is the honey, and that's how he does, is it not? And Parikshit was like that. In everybody, he saw only the guna. Nothing else. Saranga iva sarabhuk. And what guna he saw in this Kalipurusha? Yat palam nasti tapasa na yogena samadhina tat palam labate samyak kalau keshava kirtanat. In this Kali Yuga, we don't have to do yoga, we don't have to do penance. No other sadhana is required. The fruit of all sadhanas lies in a very simple sadhana called Nama Sankirtana. That's the beauty of Kali Yuga. In other yugas, we really have to do something to attain Bhagavan. But in Kali Yuga, all we have to do is just chant the divine names of Bhagavan, and that too, wherever we are, there are no rules, absolutely. And such a simple path, it is a universal path. Anybody can chant, anywhere, any time. Absolutely no rules. That's the beauty of Kali Yuga. It has this, Asti Heko Mahan Gunaha. It has one great virtue. This Kali Purusha, this Kali Yuga has one great virtue, and that is that all we have to do is Nama Sankirtana. Parikshit knew that. And that was the reason why he spared Kali Yuga, so that, people could attain Bhagavan easily, without much strain. And after that, he comes back to his kingdom after a real Digvijaya. After meeting Kalipurusha and subduing him, he comes back to his kingdom. But as we always say, the company we keep is very important. And a moment of satsanga, a moment, just a fraction of a second in the company of sadhus can elevate our life to such great heights. At the same time, a moment of dussanga, a fraction of a second in the evil company can actually, push us to the abyss of everything that's unrighteous. And that's what happened here to Parikshit. He was in the company of Kalipurusha only for a very small time. And that too to subdue him. Is it not? In spite of that, still, he had been in the bad company, in the evil company for a few moments, is it not? And that Kalipurusha took that opportunity to influence even Parikshit. So one day, when Parikshit left to hunt, see, as a king, they have a few things that they use as a time pass, right? And hunting was one of them. And Parikshit one day just went hunting into the forest. And if you remember, Parikshit had given Kalipurusha a place in Himsa. Hunting is Himsa, is it not? It's only for play, but still it had Himsa. So the moment Parikshit intended to go for hunting, Kalipurusha sat on his head. On that day, when Parikshit went into the forest, he was driving deep into the forest, still he could not find a game. And at the end of the day, he was so tired, he was so thirsty, he was so hungry, he was looking around the forest for some kind of a lake or a river or some water source. And usually the forests are full of it. But since Kalipurusha was on top of him, it was the papa, the sin, that was blinding him, and he could not perceive any water source anywhere. And finally he found a little ashrama, and it was the ashrama of a great rishi called Shamika Maharshi. He came into that ashrama and he saw that Shamika Maharshi was sitting in dhyana. And it was not a practice of dhyana, but he had attained that dhyana and he was in samadhi, completely oblivious to this world. He was in the state called Turiya, the fourth state which is beyond waking, sleeping and dreaming. He was established in his own self and he was enjoying the bliss of his self, completely oblivious to what was happening. And when Parikshit came and he prostrated unto Shamika Maharshi and he asked, Maharshi, can I get some water? Now, Shamika Maharshi was not actually in this world at all, so he could not hear him. But since Parikshit was so thirsty and so hungry, for a moment he lost his calm. He looked at the Rishi and it didn't strike him, very unusually, it didn't strike him that he could be in real dhyana. He thought maybe this Rishi is just insulting me. Maybe he is some Rishi who does not like, Kshatriyas, someone who does not like kings. Maybe he is just feigning as if he is in deep dhyana so that he can ignore me. He looked around and unfortunately for him, he found a dead serpent. Had he found a live serpent, he could have been saved, He found a dead serpent. He took his arrow, he picked that dead serpent, the tip of his arrow, and he threw that dead serpent on the neck of Shamika Maharshi. Parikshit is not someone who would do this. He comes from such a family of Bhagavatas. He knows what Mahatmas are. He would never insult them like that. But that was Kali Purusha all along. Sitting on his head. And his horoscope, should we say. And he did that. And in spite of it, had Shamika Maharshi been feigning it, that cold serpent would have caused a thrill and he would have opened his eyes. That didn't happen because he was in Turiya, the state of Samadhi. And finally, Parikshit, he just left the ashrama and he went back to his kingdom. And here, Shamika Maharishi's 7-year-old son, called Shringi, he was playing with his friends and one friend came running and told him that, do you know that, your father has a dead serpent on his neck? And Shringi ran to his father. He saw his father was still in deep meditation with that serpent there. With his Divya Jnana, with his own prowess, because that child of 7 had done so many Gayatri mantra japa that he had the power to actually look into the past and see what happened. And he saw that this King Parikshit had come and seeking hospitality, and since he did not receive anything from Shamika Maharshi, he was angry and he threw this dead serpent to insult the Rishi. When the child perceived this, he was so angry. He said, how dare a king who's supposed to be protecting us actually goes about harming us and insulting us like this. He has no right to do that. If he thinks that his arms have such a great power that he could do anything to us, then let me show him the power of mantras. And immediately the child, he sipped a bit of water and he cursed Parikshit. He said, Iti langita varyanam takshakaha saptamehani dhankshadisma kulangaram chodito me tadadruham ityuktva roshatamraksho vayasya rishibalaka kaushikyapa upasprishya vak vajram visarjaha. He used a weapon against Parikshit. It was a Vajrayuda, thunderbolt of Indra, but not in the form of a physical weapon, but Vak Vajram. The weapon in the form of words, a shapa, a curse. He said, 7 days from today, Devanaga called Takshaka will bite and kill Parikshit. Parikshit would meet his end 7 days from now. And having cursed Parikshit like that, the child starts crying. And Shamika Maharshi is now slowly coming out of Samadhi and he looks around, he sees that serpent, he just throws it out, he sees his child crying. He says, my dear child, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And Shringi narrates everything. What happened, what Parikshit did and what Shringi did. And the father, Shamika Maharshi, was not happy with Shringi. He did not say, well done my child. That's a good lesson. The king should learn a lesson and you have given him a good lesson. He didn't say that. He felt very pained. He said, Parikshit is such a great Bhagavata. He is such a great king. This land is protected from Kali Purusha because Parikshit is ruling this land. What have you done? For a simple mistake, this is nothing. Who are we? We're supposed to just transcend all this. He just threw a dead serpent on me, so you cursed him to be killed? Why would you do that? You know what a great loss it is to all of us here? That was what Shamika Maharishi felt. He did not applaud his child. He said, now that you have done this, just go and tell him at least that he has only 7 more days to live. Just inform him of that. Let him do something about it. If he wants to save his life, let him do something for it. If he wants to use those 7 days to attain Bhagavan, let him do something about it. He has so many options. He can choose what to do. So just go and tell him. A child from the ashrama rushes to Parikshith, his kingdom, to his palace, to inform of the curse. And there in the palace, when Parikshith was back from hunting, when he sat on the throne that had been occupied by all the great Mahatmas, King Yudhishthira being the last, when he sat on the throne, something pricked him. Suddenly he felt, the effect of Kali Purusha was gone. Suddenly he felt, what have I done? I'm not someone who does something like this. I have no right to be sitting on this throne anymore. I've lost the eligibility. I've lost the qualification. I've lost the right. I cannot sit here anymore. This seat belongs to people who have stood by Dharma, rain or shine. Is it not? And today, I have stepped out of that line and I have done something that is not righteous. So that very moment, I've lost the right to sit here on this throne. He wanted to punish himself. And that moment, this child from ashrama comes running and it says, it conveys the message of the curse of Shringi. And when Parikshith hears it, he's thrilled. He's so happy. He says, I want it. That is the mark of a Mahatma. Mistakes happen, can happen. But who a real Mahatma is, a real great person is, he who does not shy away from the consequences of it. Who understands that it is a mistake that we have done and who wants to rectify it and who also wants to meet the consequence of it. Parikshit did that. He says, yes, what I did was wrong and this curse is something I deserve and, that's the best thing that's happened in my life. Immediately he left his kingdom. He gave his kingdom to his child Janamejaya and he left to the banks of Mother Ganga and he took a vow of Prayopavesha, which is fasting unto death, because our scriptures do not sanction suicide. So he thought, I have 7 more days to live. And these 7 days, I'm going to be sitting there in the bank of Mother Ganga and I'll just meditate on Bhagavan. I'll just think of Bhagavan without food, without sleep. Prayopavesha is fasting unto death, but it also means that we sit in a place, don't eat, don't sleep, and not just that, we spend the time thinking and meditating on Bhagavan. That's very important. Quitting the body like that, without food, without water, without sleep, thinking of Bhagavan constantly is called Prayopavesha. And Parikshit had decided to do that. So, he goes to the bank of Mother Ganga and he sits with the vrata of Prayopavesha. The only thing that is paining Parikshit even then was just the fact that he felt that he had insulted a sadhu. And he may not be blessed with satsanga anymore. And that was the most painful thing for him. He thought, how will Bhagavan give me satsanga? I who did not know to respect the sadhu, how can I be ever blessed with satsanga? When he was sincerely feeling like that and feeling so remorseful for all that he did and was, crying internally, longing for satsanga, Tatropa-jagmuhu bhuvanam punana mahanubhava munayassa sishyaha prayena tirtha vigamapadeshaihi swayam hi tirthani punanti santaha. At that moment, all the Mahatmas from every place, everywhere, with their sishyas, with their disciples, they came to where Parikshit was sitting. Parikshit was so thrilled. How did this happen? It happened because Shamika Maharishi, for a moment, he thought of Parikshit, is it not? He thought of Parikshit and he said, oh my God, he's such a great Bhagavata. He was not someone who would do this. It was just a mistake. And that too because of, this Kali Purusha. And he sent word to this child, is it not? That thought in the heart of a Mahatma about Parikshit had actually blessed him with such a grand satsanga again. Parikshit acknowledges it. He understands that it is not because of him, but because of the grace of Mahatmas, because of his family, which is made of Mahatmas, which was, it has a lineage of Mahatmas. It's because of them that he has been blessed with satsanga again. He immediately looks at all the Mahatmas and he says, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this love and compassion of all of you. But still, you are here. Tammopayatam pratiyantu vipra Ganga cha devi dhrutachittameshe dvijopasrishtaha kuhakaha takshakova dashatvalam gayata vishnu ghadha. Now I am not bothered about Takshaka or anything. Let Takshaka come. Let him kill me. I really don't care. But till I live, please, Gayata Vishnu Gatha, please sing the glories of Bhagavan. I just want to listen and nothing else. And everyone is looking at the other because they had not come here to give a discourse. They had all gathered there to hear a discourse. Is it not? Because they knew that Shukacharya, who had learnt Bhagavatam from his father Vyasacharya, was waiting and waiting and waiting for this day. For this day when Parikshit would come and, someone like Parikshit would come and Shukacharya could narrate Bhagavatam. So everyone knew Shukacharya would come, and then Parikshit asked all the sages to talk about the glories of Bhagavan. Tatra bhavad Bhagavan Vyasaputro yadrichaya gamatamano anapekshaha alakshya lingo nijalabhatushto pritascha balaihi avadhuta veshaha. At that moment, Vyasacharya, Sri Shukacharya comes there and Parikshit gets up and he says, Aho, Adyavayam Brahmanna Satsevyaha Kshatrabandavaha Kripaya Atiti Rupena Bhavadbihi Tirtaka Kritaha. Ha! How blessed I am to have your darshan. And he offers him seat. He offers him water to wash his hands and legs, and he makes him sit. He does puja and he says, I am the most blessed person. Yesham samsmaranat punsam sadhya shuddhyanti vaigraha kim punaha darshana sparsha pada shauchasanadibhi. You are such a great Mahatma that when people just think of you, yesham samsmaranat punsam sadhya shuddhyanti vaigraha. They are immediately purified by just merely thinking of you. Such is your greatness, such is your glory, and if that is the case, what do I tell, what do I speak of my fortune where I am seeing you, not just thinking, I am seeing you, I am worshipping you, I am offering you water and puja, how blessed I am. Is it not? And at this moment, Parikshit asks a beautiful question. Purushasyeha yat karyam mriyamanasya sarvatha. Only 2 questions. He says, what should one do while living? When a person is living, what should one do? And what should one do at the time of death? Only 2 questions. These are 2 questions for Parikshit. But if we actually think, these 2 questions would merge into one for us. Because Parikshit is so fortunate. We don't have that kind of a blessing. How is he fortunate? He knows that from 7 days from now, he would die. Right? So he is the first person to actually know the date of his death. None of us know that. We know our birth date. Is it not? But we would never know when we will die. And what is the glory in knowing when we will die? The beauty is, Parikshit knew, since he knew that he would die only 7 days from now, he was assured of 7 days of life. That is what we are not assured of. The moment we say we don't know when we will die, it means it can be any moment, any second. Is it not? So the greatest advantage that Parikshit had was he knew for sure that he would live for 7 days. He could not die before that because there was this curse of this child and it has to be taken care of. He can't die before that death. So death has to wait for him for the 7 days. Nothing can kill him before that. That's the beauty of it. But we don't have that kind of an assurance, is it not? So for Parikshit, he says, while I am living for the 7 days, what should I do? At the time of death, what should I do? But for us, it's the same question. At the time of death. Every moment for us could be the time of death. Any moment could be the time of death. So, what should we be doing constantly? That's the question. And he makes it more clear. He says, Yat shrotavyam, atho japyam, yat kartavyam dribi prabho, smartavyam, bhajaniyam va, bruhi yadva viparyayam. He splits the two questions into 6. He says, what should I hear? Yat shrotavyam, atho japyam, what should I do? What should I chant? What should I do japa of? Yat kartavyam, what are the things that I should be doing? Smartavyam, what should I be thinking of? Bhajaniyam, what should I be adoring? Whom should I be singing? And not just these 5, bruhi yadva viparyayam. And what are the things that I should not be doing? Do nots are more important than the do's, is it not? So he's asking these 6 questions. And with these 6 questions, the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, with 19 chapters in the first canto. And with this question, the first canto with 19 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam comes to a conclusion. So, Parikshit meets Shukacharya. Shukacharya actually comes to Parikshit and Parikshit puts these questions to Shukacharya. And in the second canto, we will start with the answer of Shukacharya to Parikshit. So, with this, we conclude the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapurana, and with prayers to the lotus feet of Bhagavan and our Sadguru Maharaj, that we may be blessed to listen to the rest of Bhagavatam too. We have second canto to 12th canto now. So we are taking canto by canto in this Bhagavatam 101 class. And with the prayer to Bhagavan and Guru Maharaj, that he blesses so we can continue learning this Bhagavatam, understanding the basic story of Bhagavatam, and the prayer that we get more and more satsanga, we are blessed with more and more satsanga, and with a prayer that we develop a taste for chanting the divine names of Bhagavan, and we develop a taste for reading and listening to Bhagavad Katha, to this Bhagavatam. We conclude the first canto. Kayena vacha manasendriyaiva buddhyatmana va prakrite svabhavat karomi yatyat sakalam parasmai Srimannarayanaeti samarpayami Gopika Jeevanasmaranam Govinda Govinda Sadgurunath Maharaj ki Jai.